Now, I said at the beginning of this, there's quite a bit. We've done a lot of housekeeping. There's one more bit of housekeeping we need to do before we go further, and that is making sure that we have that autosave selected. So to do that, we go up to the top here to Edit, down to Preferences, and down to Autosave. That then opens our Preferences window right here. If you'd have just clicked General, that would have been here. It's just a bit of a quicker way to get to where you want in the preferences. We'll just hit General there, and we can go straight down to Autosave. It's great to be in here. I love it in here, and we will look at just a touch of what you need to make sure that is right in here. Okay, so we've got the check on here for automatically save projects. I think 15 minutes, you can do a lot. Once you get up to speed, not necessarily while watching this tutorial, but once you get up to speed, you can actually do quite a lot in 15 minutes. And as a lot of the stuff that you do in video is time to maybe a bit of music, or you're eyeballing a lot of things, maybe you're moving around a bit of text or a bit of video, you're animating it. In 15 minutes you can do quite a lot of work, and losing that and then having to recreate it as best as you could, that not only will you not be able to get it exactly how you had it the first time, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing, but it's the feeling. It's the feeling of going through all those steps again, thinking, I've already done this. So this is very much a personal preference, as a lot of these things are in this program. But it kind of depends how much you're willing to put up with it popping up with autosave all the time. I normally have it at 6 minutes. That's just a personal preference for me, and that's just how I work. Maximum project versions, I think we're okay at 20. So once it auto saves 20 times, it will then overwrite even the oldest of those autosave versions. I'll show you what the autosaves look like as we go through, as we build some autosaves in this project. Save backup project to Creative Cloud. I've never done that. You can actually have something within Premiere Pro and a lot of the other Adobe programs where you can do team editing. I've never got it quite to work. I think that's actually within collaboration. Yeah, and I don't use that. A number of editing houses that maybe have people who are working remotely or just literally collaborating in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, they will have team projects. Isn't it amazing that we can do these things now? It blows my mind, and I work in tech and online most of my life, and yet I'm still blown away at some of the things we can do these days. I'll have a quick look through these because I've actually wiped my settings. So let's have a quick look through and see if there's anything that I can spot that I have changed in the past. You won't have this, Mr. Horse Premiere Composer. This is a plugin that I use all the time, and looking forward, we may add to this course with regards to plugins and things like that. Let's see how we go. But a lot of your work can be done with plugins and stuff. Device control, I don't really touch that. This pre-roll it's the playback once you actually add an effect. I don't really bother with that. Graphics it will be dependent on your geographical location. Labels are great. A lot of videographers and editors use them. I will show you how you can use them to help you be able to see what you need to in your timeline at a glance. We will touch on that. In media, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a lesson, and you can try and get your head around it as I'm saying it, but this could be something that you need to really understand and look at in more detail with regards to where you are, what you've shot, or what you'll be shooting. So the media time base here is 25 FPS. I output in 25 FPS. FPS quite simply stands for frames per second. So if you think about an animation, a cartoon, every second, if we're running at 25 frames per second, that would be one of those old style, old school cells of a cartoon. One of those, 25 of those every second. Okay, that's our main output. That's my main output, and that is the main output of the UK. These rules don't really matter as much as they used to with regards to TV screens and all that kind of thing, depending on where you are geographically. They don't matter that much anymore. They do matter in one sense, and that is hertz. That's HZ or HERTZ, to give you the full name, and I will touch on that. So keep that in mind. We will circle back to that. So we output in 25 frames per second. That I have found on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. Outputting in 25 FPS is a great frame rate to give a natural feel. That's what a lot, in fact, most videographers output in. They may put out in 24p or 24 FPS in the US and in certain other parts of the country, of the world, but generally 25 FPS is that. I'm not going to over egg this right now because we are going to have to circle back to this, but just as it's come up here, let's just keep that in mind. Our output is 25 frames per second. That is not to be confused with shutter speed if you're a videographer, and it's not to be confused with your resolution, whether it be 1080, which is full HD, or 4K or even 8K. We're not playing with 8K footage here. You do have one 4K piece of footage in your course work that I've sent you. That's just to show you what can be done with it. But anyway, everything else is 1080, but 25 FPS, keep that in mind. What I said at the beginning was it's not that complicated, but anything that does need to be explained, I need you to just sit there and listen and to try and get it into your head. Let's just move on. I think that's enough thinking for now. Media cache. So depending on what your system is like, you may want to offload your cache to a different drive. So my main program is running on the C drive. The media cache files are also being put here on the C drive. That's putting a lot of work on the C drive. If I go to browse and I go to my computer, I actually have a cache hard drive right here. And again, this, remember where we set up the scratch files in there? I set up my media cache in here. It's on a different hard drive. It doesn't have to bother with anything. Again, my media cache database, that will also go into my cache. This isn't absolutely pertinent what you need to do, but it is best practice if you need to set up on an external, on an additional internal hard drive if you have it. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. Media cache management, I automatically delete cache files over 90 days, and I always step that down to 45. It doesn't delete any footage, it just deletes the cache. Your cache is what's building up in the background with Premiere Pro, and before you know it, you may not have added anything else to your computer. You may be working with the same 2 or 3 gigs worth of footage, but all of a sudden your hard drive is full, and that's because the cache is here and building up in the background to make it faster in the program. Problem is, when that gets too much, it then actually doesn't. It makes it slow down. I'll show you how to clear that out as well. I have 64 gigs on my computer. Most laptops will come between 8 and 16 gigabytes now. The more gig RAM you have, the faster it will run. Just make sure that you do have some reserved for other programs, so other things can run in the background. In Windows, that's Windows Explorer and all that kind of does, which runs the operating system in the background. With regards to Macs, it would be being able to run the iOS. As you can see, my RAM is shared with AE, which is After Effects, Premiere Pro, PL, which it's Prelude, which doesn't actually run anymore. I think it runs in the background. Adobe Media Encoder. Remember I said there was a program that was bundled with Premiere Pro, so that's Media Encoder. I've got PS, which is Photoshop, and Audition. So yeah, 58 gigabytes of the 64 gigabytes of my RAM installed is actually shared pretty much across Adobe. Playback. This doesn't really need to be bothered with. It's when you add a transition or anything and you hit play straight away. We don't really need to touch on that. And that's for your sync settings. That's just when you set up your settings, you can actually sync them and save them elsewhere. And that's always a really good thing to do. I'm not going to do it on this because it's going to overwrite my own settings, but I will show you how. And I haven't started any sync yet, and I don't intend to, but I will show you how to. In your timeline, don't worry about all this. This is absolutely fine. There's nothing to change here. We're still on 25 frames a second. Audio transition, our default transition is 1 second. That's fine. Still image default duration, I'll show you that. That's 5 seconds. That's fine. And everything else is great. And in trim, it means absolutely nothing to me. It really doesn't. So it shouldn't really bother you. Hit OK, and all the changes that we've made are saved in there. Let's just touch on that sync settings. If you look down the bottom left hand side here, if you click that, you can actually sync your settings now. And in that screen, if you'd set up, you will have it set up with whatever email address you set up with Premiere Pro, with Adobe. It will sync those settings. And if you ever have to reinstall, you just hit sync settings again, and it will bring down all of those settings that you had. Once I've finished recording this, I will manage my sync settings and I will bring back down my old settings. But then again, I'm setting them up again, so it doesn't really matter, does it? Okay, so that is the last bit of housekeeping. I promise to this point. This is a long and arduous task at first, but everything you've done up until this point will not need to be repeated, other than starting the project. How good does that feel? That everything you've done now doesn't need to be redone, especially if you sync your settings. The minute that you've synced your settings, everything will be great. Okay, strap in, because next chapter we are getting into bringing in our footage and starting to play. But brace yourself, there will be a little bit more information with regards to frame rates. Sorry, but it does need to be covered.